Thanks a lot. All right, accessibility-driven design. So this is actually the first time I'm telling this story publicly. I used to work for the Ontario government, and I made a little thing called Ontario.ca. And I'm going to tell you all about all the design decisions that went into that. Obviously, I didn't make it by myself. I had a team, but I played a pretty strong role in that. So first, before we kick off, I want to use an example of something I've done when I've run design workshops in the past. It's called 5 Favorite Things, and it's a great way to break the ice with people in the room. And so these are my 5 favorite things, starting with sports, equestrian. I am not good at team sports, so me and a horse, that's all I can handle. My husband, who's from Guatemala, and those are some of my nieces and nephews. My favorite city in the world is Amsterdam, which I'd love to get back to at some point. I've only been there once. My hearing aids. So I'm actually hearing disabled, and I wear hearing aids in both of my ears, so this is going to be fun when it comes to the question. They do have the captions there, so I'm going to do my best. And my cats. I'm actually, in addition to being an expert in accessibility, I'm an expert in designing and making raw cat food recipes from scratch. So if anyone wants to talk about either of those 2 topics, come see me afterwards. So this story, I'm going to start in 2015. That's my little time machine. We're going to go back in time to 2015, which was the year when rats carried slices of pizza down the stairwells of the New York subway. It's when Bruce Jenner decided to become Caitlyn Jenner. And it's the year of that black and blue or white and gold dress. I see black and blue. I don't know where the white and gold come from, but it was a thing. It was also the year where I think finally flat design won, and skeuomorphism was just like dead. It was knocked out. And we saw this happen as sites redesigned. So this is Airbnb before. Look at all those gradients, those drop shadows, and even at the bottom there, those photos with, the fake postcard style stack. And then they simplified. For better or for worse, everyone did this. And we ended up with flat design with no gradients, no drop shadows. I don't know. I still, years later, I don't know if I like it or not. I can't decide. Governments got on board. This is the White House at the time, back when Obama. And I pulled all of these from a really nifty site called the Wayback Machine. So if you ever want to look up things in the past, that's how you do it. The Government of Canada tried its best with flat design too. And then this was Ontario.ca back in 2015. It was also the year of the Pan Am Games, which were hosted in Toronto. That's why we got all these kids at the swimming pool there. And so I was the UX lead at the time that this site launched. And there were a lot of decisions that went into this design, and there's a big story behind it. So I want to go back even further in time to 2012, which is when the Government of Ontario's website looked like this. All the links were green or black or white, depending on where they were in the navigation or not. There was a lot going on here. And it was just time to freshen up the look and feel. It was mostly a project based on changing the underlying architecture. So it was really done for the systems that ran the site more than the look and feel. But if you're going to redesign the back end, you might as well redesign the front end and modernize that. And so we did. We were heavily inspired by GovUK. And at that time, they had just launched Alpha, which was their experiment. And it was search-focused. You can see right up there, I'm looking for. They really thought, they had this theory that people don't want to browse government websites. They just want to search and find what they're looking for. So let's just really emphasize that search. We're going to put it front and center. We'll have some links, but mostly we think everyone's going to search. Didn't quite work out that way, but we'll get to that in a minute. And so we were heavily influenced by that, and we did something similar where the very first thing on the page is search. We hid a lot of those links. So this is a lot cleaner of a look and feel than the previous ones. And this was outsourced to an agency, the look and feel of this. But there are definitely some issues with this design. The brief that we gave to the agency was mostly on how it should look. And there was not really any consideration for user needs. Wasn't uncommon at that time for government to just do, whatever they wanted to do without talking to users and understanding what their needs were. And so something happened when we launched that site, which is we got a lot of negative feedback. This is one of the quotes directly from a user of the site, and it said, "This is the most frustrating website I have ever tried to navigate." And we got a lot of that. So this whole idea of you can just search and find what you need on a government website, it didn't work. So we went back to the drawing board. And this time we decided we're going to redesign in-house, and I was in-house at the time. And we got a brief from an executive to make it look like Apple. And so I spent a really long time trying to steer this ship. If everyone remembers when that big tanker got stuck in the canal, well, that little machine trying to dig it out, that was me. Because I'm like, we cannot just use Apple as our way of designing a government website. So there was a lot of work that went into trying to steer that ship. And really, being in government is like trying to turn an oil tanker around or dig it out of a canal. It's slow work, and anyone who works in a large corporation probably feels the same way. So let's go forward again in time to 2015. I spent a number of years working on this new look and feel, and by that time, the government of UK had redesigned as well. And they also realized you still need navigation. Right? Like you can't just have search only. And in fact, navigation was one of the most important things because people can't find what they're looking for if they don't know what it's called. Government has this horrible way of naming programs and services in a way that nobody can figure out. So you might be looking for money from the government, but you have to know the name of the program. And so you had to have an information architecture that would help people figure out, how do I find that program that gives me money, or tells me the rules about my taxes, or whatever it is you need from the government. And so the UX team had gotten bigger. We started off as a team of 7 in total. So there were 2 UX people and a handful of developers and a project manager. And at this time, the team had tripled in size to 6 on the UX team alone, never mind how many developers there were. So that was good, because we were doing this in-house. We needed more people. I do this to almost every team I work with. At some point, everyone gets their head photoshopped onto a body, because I'm old school, and this is what Photoshop is good for, right? And we really thought of ourselves as the guardians of the galaxy. And the galaxy was Ontario, and the people we were guarding were the Ontarians, and we wanted to do good things for them. And so we went away, we made mood boards, and we thought, okay, what does Ontario feel like? Is it vibrant? Is it human? We looked at stock photos, we came up with colors, all the things you do when you're trying to come up with a brand. We made wireframes, we made prototypes. So there was a lot of work and a lot of iteration that went into that to land on this, which is what it looked like at 2015 when we launched that second iteration after the agency. So this was the in-house version. And it was heavily influenced by GovUK as well. Like you can see the similarities, logo at the top, navigation, links. We did have more imagery than GovUK, because we still have that executive who's really keen on Apple, so we were trying to get like a halfway point there. But there are a lot of decisions that went into that design, and I can't talk about all of them. So you have to think about the font, the color, the layout, the navigation, the information architecture. Responsive versus adaptive was really a big thing. Now everyone just does responsive, but there was a point in time where you would actually have a separate mobile site, and we had a big argument with the developer over why we should do responsive. I'm glad I won. Otherwise, they'd be redesigning already. But I can't talk about all of this, so I'm just going to talk about the fonts and the colors and how accessibility played into making those decisions. So our starting point from that agency redesign was headings made with cabin font, and then the body font was Arial. And of course, we had to use Helvetica. So again, trying to move that ship. This was an internal brief that we actually wrote for our own design team. And right at the top of the list was fonts needed to be legible and accessible. So it was not Helvetica. That was not the first item on the list. It was accessible. They also had to be fast to load, culturally appropriate. At some point in time, we thought we literally had to say no Comic Sans. I don't know why, but it was there. This is the original brief. We wanted something that looked nice and that was quick and easy to implement. And so we went away and we did a lot of research on, what kind of fonts would fit into that. And that research is what helped us to convince folks of the font that we finally chose. And we didn't really have data at that time. This was a long time ago. We just had best practices. There was a study that just came out this year. Gareth Ford-Williams from BBC worked on the study, and they looked at Helvetica, and it was pretty much middle of the road when it comes to readability and accessibility. So it wasn't great, it wasn't terrible, but it probably not a good choice for somebody who puts accessibility first, where you really want people to be able to read all the content. They did not study Open Sans. However, they did look at a font called Stego UI, which is very similar to Open Sans, and it was one of the most readable fonts. So I feel a little bit vindicated that the data shows we made a good choice. And I'll get to the reasons we were able to make that choice, which is one of the real deciding factors was it was actually $300 a month US to license that font. And it's really hard to get money in government. You think $300 a month is not a lot, but your budgets, they're set annually. So you need to know 18 months in advance that you want to buy a font. So we ended up choosing the open source font. When I said earlier that the back end was one of the reasons we redesigned that website, we had moved from proprietary content management system to open source content management system. So a lot of the work that we were doing was based on open source. So it made sense to pick an open source font, and there was a budgetary reason. So it wasn't actually accessibility that convinced the executives that we couldn't use Helvetica, but it's why we did all the research and how we ended up there. So sometimes you got to make a business case, right? So you might have one motivation, but you got to sell it somehow, and that's how we did it. And we did end up choosing Open Sans as the font for Ontario.ca. Quick public service announcement. I know some of you out there have these really thin, really light fonts. They are terrible for readability. Stop it. Stop it, enough already. Nobody can read your fonts. And, if that's hard to read, imagine you're way further away and it's even harder. So please, whatever you do, if you can make your font darker or bolder or both, people will thank you. They will be able to read your content. And you, if you're not 40 yet, you will thank yourself when you turn 40. So another consideration in fonts, we had this problem in government with marketing. Government marketing loves a good infographic. This is one from the CDC. And if you've ever tried to make an accessible infographic, it's impossible. You can't. You just can't. You could put this giant alternative text description on it, but that's not really good practice. And that's not going to help anyone who has low vision. If they start to try to magnify that, it's just going to get pixelated and blurry. So what are we going to do about this? Well, we thought we were clever. So again, from a design briefing, we thought, let's just choose another font. We're going to choose a font called Railway, and it looks funky. You can see it in the 25, the 3, and the 18. And we're going to use some CSS, and we're going to make some shapes, and we're going to do some layouts, and we called them Smarties. And when we made them small, we called them Skittles. And we took these circles and numbers, and we made timelines, and we made all kinds of cool things with CSS so that we wouldn't have to do these giant image infographics, and it was accessible. So it's great. Then something happened. As the Frank's Red Hot lady says, I put that shit on everything, and Railway is now the heading font for everything on every government website, and it was never intended to be used that way. So Government of Ontario, the COVID info, every single heading on this page is now in Railway. The body font's still Open Sans, but we sort of figured out after the fact that Railway wasn't the most readable font. If you ever look up the W in Railway, it has an X in the middle of it. I don't know why. It's not a great font. So it was fine for the little Smarties, but Once this train left the station, people wanted railway everywhere. My husband still worked for the government. A couple months ago, he showed me a PowerPoint. The body font, it was just a wall of railway. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It should not be used like that. It was horrible. It was unreadable. So we tried, but at this point, there was no turning back. It's still there to this day. But how did it happen? Really, the problem was we couldn't figure out how to pay users for testing, because I think we could have stopped this one if we did some user testing and said, hey, not a readable font, you can't use it like that. But we couldn't figure that out. Government didn't know how to pay people back in the day. It really was a problem. We had debates for like, can we cut a check? Can we ask the Minister of Finance to write people a check so that we can pay them for their time, so that we can do user testing? And we have since figured it out, but at the time, all we really had to go with was at the bottom of each page, we had this thumbs up, thumbs down, which we ripped off from Facebook, but there was a comment area. Whenever somebody put a thumb down, they could send a message, and it would come into an inbox, and I would read it. So that's how I know that redesign didn't work, because people kept filling this out and telling me how terrible it was and how they couldn't find anything. So I really didn't have any actual user testing to go on, just the feedback from the site. And it wasn't enough. Nobody was complaining about railway, unfortunately. Nowadays, the government does do user testing. We figured out how to pay people actual money, not just gift cards and things. And we have, well, not we anymore, I'm not there anymore, but they have. It's a part of my life. I was there for 18 years, so it's hard to let go of. They do have a lab up in Kitchener-Waterloo where the Communitech Center is. And so they do actually test with users, including people with disabilities now. So hopefully mistakes like that will not happen again. Now, the other thing I want to talk about was the color choice. So green versus blue was actually a big, major sticking point for us. We needed to choose a color for length. And so my little illustration here is whether Green Lantern would win if he was in a fight with Mystique, to represent the epic battle of green versus blue that happened. If you recall, prior to our redesign, all the lengths were green, and then they changed them to yellow. It's not really even yellow. It's like the darkest yellow you could make to pass the contrast ratio for the minimum, but it's kind of brown kind of yellow. I don't even know what to call that color, but it's not a good choice. Please don't make your length yellow ever. So we definitely had to fix that. So why would we even think of green? Well, the official flower of Ontario is the trillium, and we can't have yellow or white length, so there's just green. The Ontario flag has some green in it. The Franco-Ontarian flag is green and white, and there was a short, brief period of time when the Ontario logo in 1994 was green. So we thought if Ontario has a color, it's green. That's our brand. From a pure contrast perspective, as far as whether or not green lengths on a white background would be readable, they are. So that was our first accessibility check. It could work. But one of the considerations, this is a great article, Revisiting Why Hyperlinks Are Blue. If you ever wondered, it goes way, way back in time to 1993, where it became an industry standard to have blue links. And so that was really important to us from a cognitive perspective. There are lots of people coming to the government website. There are people with cognitive disabilities. There are people who are not familiar with technology, who don't use the internet very often. There are seniors. There are people who just don't have access to technology. And we wanted to make sure everything was really clear and easy to understand for everyone. So blue kind of became the clear choice. And then we thought, well, we still have this green. How do we make the blue and the green work together? Can we put green in the header? But then we'd have to make the buttons green and the links blue. And we thought, well, that might be confusing for folks. So I tried a little bit of blue button on a green background, and that was just ugly. It wasn't great contrast either. And so that's how that blue link color actually ended up, because we wanted to bring it forward into the button, making that header go from green to a black. So we weren't straight up copying GovUK with that black header bar, but it was actually based on the need to choose an accessible link color, and that dictated all the other choices around color and design. And so my takeaway from, choosing colors, choosing fonts, I've got 3 takeaways from this. One is lead with user needs and data. If you can test with users, test with users. Test with users with disability. Test with people with low vision, with cognitive disability, people who use assistive technology, seniors. Test with as many people as you can. The things you learn up front will influence the design choices you make, and you don't know how long-lasting those choices will be, because here it is, 2022, and Ontario.ca still pretty much looks the same. So good thing I at least thought of accessibility. Secondly, when you're in an organization and you're trying to get buy-in for accessibility, it's hard. So push that ship. Keep pushing it. Get other people to help you push it. You'll get there eventually. If not, find another job. Accessibility is important. And my last lesson is, let's put accessibility on everything. You really can design a website, design an app based on accessibility. I've done it. You can do it. And Fable can help you figure out how. So look me up on Twitter and LinkedIn if you want to just get accessibility news all the time, hear about other events we're on, and if you're looking to do accessibility-driven design, visit makeitfable.com, because that's what we specialize in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. That was an incredible talk. I think every time I'll be using now thin fonts, I'll definitely have that voice behind me telling me to stop it. It's enough. Okay, do we have questions for Kate? We have one question at the back.
Okay, amazing talk. One thing, I'm US based and I also do work in government, and one thing that we've faced is that in our attempts to do usability testing with folks with disabilities, we've run into limitations around asking folks whether they have disabilities and, respecting privacy and PII and that sort of thing. Have you ever run into that? And I'm curious if you have any suggestions on how to navigate that.
Yeah, one of the things you can do is instead ask about their accessibility needs as opposed to asking about their disability. So if you're doing a screener form, you can ask, do you need larger fonts? Do you change your user settings? That kind of thing. Do you use any assistive technology without directly asking about disability? Because you're right, it is a private thing. Not everyone comes up on stage and says, hey, I'm disabled. I do, but not everyone does. And there's lots of reasons for that. So yeah, great question.
If you have any other questions, this projector laser.
And definitely, if you want to chat with me later, I will be around. I'm not hard to miss in this pink dress.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kate. Big round of applause. Also, once again, a big shout out to Fable, for being the lead partner at our conference and supporting us. Really appreciate that.